Hello, I am Barry Cooper. I am one half of Cooper and Cary Have Words. 4,000 miles away is my friend James Cary, who is currently situated in Yeovil, Somerset. How on earth are you, James?
I am in Yeovil, Somerset. The sign says so, and the sign never lies.
That's right.
But yeah, it's great to be here. I'm sad that you're back in Florida and that we never managed to meet whilst you were in this country and less than 100 miles away from me. But there we go. Such is life. The divine comedy continues.
That's right. And I feel on this episode in particular, we need to not waggle on the tea, because that piece of priceless wisdom has been given to us by the man that we are interviewing today. And we've tried to stick to it. Good friend of the show, Brant Hansen. Brant, welcome.
Thank you. Do you guys feel like it would ruin it all if you guys actually met? Like that would just ruin everything? Like the whole vibe?
There's a space-time continuum risk involved, to be honest. Yeah, I do.
Right.
Yeah, three of us in one room.
Or would it just be so disillusioning? Yeah. You're just like, no, I can't go on.
Yeah, I think so.
Absolutely.
You're a bit shorter than I thought you were. You know, that kind of thing.
That's what normally happens. People turn out to be shorter.
We did actually get some time in a room together at the end of last year. Was it November sometime?
Yeah.
And we go back and dig out that episode if you haven't seen it, because you do get to see James and I looking slightly perplexed in each other's company. But it was great.
And to be fair, when we we didn't even know we were recording an episode. That was something for Speak Life, wasn't it? So in a way, it was just right. Yeah. So ironically, the only time we recorded an episode together in the same room, we didn't realise we were doing it. So that seems about right. We're waggling. We're continuing to waggle. Stop waggling. Why are we having this conversation?
Any excuse to get Brant on the show, to be honest. But Brant has got a new book out, and it is. I think it's out now. Is it available in the US, or is it very soon?
It comes out March 29, so it depends on when it's. So you can pre-order it, and I'd love it if you would.
Please do. Order 7, order thousands, and build a fort with them, to use one of Brant's comments in this new book. What is the point of this book, Brant? Why did you want to write the men we need?
Well, I just feel like we've deconstructed masculinity pretty well, and it's needed, and like that's a very good thing. But I don't see many visions being put forth for what's the unifying theory of if there is a distinct masculinity. Like, and I appreciate the books that are like, hey, we shouldn't be John Wayning Jesus and that sort of stuff. It's totally true. But I'm left, okay, well, what's the vision then? Tell us what is the distinct vision for what God wants of men? Is there one? And so I'm taking a shot at it. And I think it's easier, honestly, as you guys know, it's easier to deconstruct than it is to actually construct something. So that's what I'm trying to do now.
It sounds like you were kind of, because I listened to the Brant and Sherry Oddcast. It sounds like Sherry kind of bullied you into actually writing this book. And
she totally did.
But because saying that basically guys were coming up to you. I know you joke about this on the Oddcast, that guys come up to you and talk about how to be smooth and that kind of thing. But guys do come up to you and ask you advice and stuff. I mean, how does that happen? And what do you say? And, you know, obviously you've written this book to answer that question, but were you finding that happening a lot?
Yeah, and I think it's because I'm not the outdoorsy guy like that you would typically think would write this sort of thing. So I relate to a lot of guys that are more bookish, more maybe analytical in nature, or nerdy would be another way to put it, like Lord of the Rings fans, that kind of stuff. And they're gamers too, like big time gamers, strategy games or video or whatever. Like I think they approach me because they see something that they instinctively go, okay, maybe that's what it's supposed to be like, but I'm not all those other things that they don't relate to. I hope that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And do you think that those are the guys that, I'm thinking about Jordan Peterson and the books that he's written. He's clearly connected with, you know, a whole bunch of guys. I never quite sure whether to say swathe or swath. I think there's some differences in that, but a swath of guys, a bunch of guys who just, it's as if they have lacked a father figure or good guidance, and suddenly in comes this guy who is very much tell it like it is, full of imperatives, and people have really responded to big time. There's just been an explosion that's really caught everybody by surprise. To what extent? I mean, there's a lot of imperatives in your book as well. Very, very challenging ones, very encouraging ones.
Yeah.
But yeah, go on. What were you going to say?
Well, I hope it's wisdom. Now, there's only 6. I mean, he gets 12. I'm like, his IQ is double mine. It all works out. I really did want to give decisions that guys can make rather against what's concrete. I want the book to actually be a blessing. It's not a theoretical thing. It's not an academic thing. That's an easy direction for me to go to. Just keep it kind of an academic. Like, we need a construct here. Like, no, this is how I think you actually live it out. I know it takes some audacity to do that. There's going to be people behind me cleaning this room too, which is nice, and I welcome.
That's fine. Maybe we
welcome them. They're very nice. It just happens to be. We probably should see how she responds to it, but I'm actually trying to say, like, I know I'm 52. At some point, in as much as I can self-deprecate and say, well, what do I have to offer? I'm no expert. Well, I'm not an expert, but maybe I do have something to offer. Maybe I actually have learned some things. And that's what Cary, my producer, was saying. You know what? You do. Yeah, I've seen your family. You're not the only one by a long stretch, but I see how secure your daughter is with you and how they enjoy you, and your wife as well. Like, I see this really well-functioning situation. So maybe you do have something to say. And then, again, seeing all the deconstruction going, I'm like, well, let me take a shot at it, at least show what I'm aiming for. And maybe that'll be a blessing to people. Because if you just have all the pieces to the puzzle, but you don't have the box top, you never really know what you're supposed to be shooting for. And I honestly feel like that's a lot of guys. That's maybe why Jordan Peterson, I'm sure that's a big part of it. Like, just give me something.
Yeah, that feeds into the question. To live a life that isn't meaningless and doesn't feel purposeless, you have to know what you are for. What's your function? What is a man for?
Right.
And that's you go straight into answering that question, obviously. And you have a particular answer because you're a Christian believer. You have a very distinctive answer. What are men for?
Yeah. Well, I take the shot, as you guys know, I take a shot at saying, look, Adam was given a specific job, and it's the keeper of the garden. And Eve is not given that job. Not that she can't do things, like she can, and we know women can do things, but this was Adam's assignment, what he was made for. And so I kind of explore what that actually is. It's not just a protective thing. It is protecting this garden. But if you think what somebody who's gardening is, or keeping a garden, like you're creating order from chaos. You're providing a place of safety for species that wouldn't thrive in the wild.
One thing you picked up on with Adam, Brant, which I don't think I'd ever really noticed before, is the passivity of Adam in that moment. So I'd always thought, as you did, I think, that when Eve was busy reaching out for the fruit, that he was off somewhere else in the garden, minding his own business. He was miles away. He didn't know what was going on. But as you make clear from the text, I mean, it seems to imply pretty strongly he's standing right there. But he doesn't reach out to stop her reaching out. He doesn't refuse the fruit or any of that. It's all just like, he's just right there, presumably just checking out what's going on. Possibly even lying down, as you say in the book. So that's an extraordinary thing.
This is what I hadn't really noticed before, is how he also has opportunities to kind of make good, or at least to not make it so bad. So he failed to intervene when the fruit was being offered and taken. He then ate, and he didn't have to. He then could have owned up, but actually his amazing plan for when God comes is, hey, we should hide, because that's going to work with an omnipresent, omnipotent being. And I'm just imagining them crouching behind a hedge, and it's just pathetic, isn't it?
It is, and then the blaming, which you have to give him some credit, just as people who traffic in words, as all three of us do, for the word economy of being able to blame Eve and God in like one sentence. I mean, that's amazing. So I point out that he's waxing poetic about Eve, like moments before, after she's given to him as a gift, and then it's flesh of my flesh and bone of my bone. It's literally a poem. And then when he's in trouble, it's that woman you gave me. like I'm blaming you and I'm blaming her. I mean, that's quite a pivot.
I mean, I'm laughing,
Yeah.
but entire fall of man for thousands of years, ruin, misery, evil, disease, war, pestilence. Do you know what I mean? But that's what was so devastating about reading that again. I was just thinking, well, if that's where my passivity as a man, as a father, as a husband, ultimately tends, that is a real slap in the face, a good slap in the face, but a slap in the face nonetheless. Because I think we don't often think of our passivity in those terms. We just think of it as, well, it's not really okay. So maybe it's not doing something, but it's not like, it's kind of neutral. You know what I mean? Because I'm not doing anything, but actually, it's not.
Right. So it feels like it's not toxic masculinity because you're not being domineering. You're certainly not being that, which is good. You don't want to be domineering. Like that's not the point of masculinity either. And then but there's another toxic, isn't there? Like there's this toxic passivity. And when I've talked to people I know who are family counselors, they say they run into the passive male way more than the domineering male. Way more. Like he's checked out. It's just yes, dear, yes, dear, yes, dear. And that makes the wife, in that case, have to step up in so many ways. It's incredibly stressful for her, and she learns to resent him. And there's a contempt that builds in the marriage too. But he can be like, "Well, I don't abuse anybody." It was like, yeah, but you've missed the point. Like, so I do like this image of keeper of the garden because it is an active one. But again, it's life giving for the people around us. It's not a dominating one.
Yeah. It's so easy, isn't it, to draw the wrong opposite. So men being aggressive is not intrinsically a good thing, but the opposite of aggressive isn't passive. That's not. They don't quite link there, do they? And actually, we're looking for men to be to lead, but not to be aggressive. I mean, they're in some ways completely different things.
Well, but I would say too, like I think there's a time to be aggressive, right? I mean, so it's what is the big picture? What's the rubric for win? And I would say it's to defend the vulnerable. I think that's it. And I think women understand this and respect the heck out of it, and they intuitively know that that's what we're for. And I said that with regard to like younger guys reading this. I'm like, it is true that if you embody this stuff, if you are actively engaged in making people feel secure around you, women will find you more attractive. That is a fact. They may not think you're hot. I have no idea, but it's like more attractive than you were when you were being passive. Mm-hmm. There's no question about it. And I think we have no better example right now. You know who the hottest guy on the planet is, don't you? Mm. Like right now?
I'm guessing. Yeah.
I mean, women are going wild. He's 5'7", and he's an average-looking guy by all accounts prior to the war. But Zelensky is the heartthrob of the globe. Why? It's because he's like, I'm not leaving. I'm going to stay behind, and we're going to protect these homes and women and children out first. We're protecting. I'm not leaving. And women intuitively are like, that's incredibly attractive. This was a guy who was not, I mean, I know he was an actor and stuff, but he is not a male model type guy.
A character actor is how we realistically refer to him. Yeah.
No, he was a comedian, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Comedians are normally ugly.
I mean,
yes, he was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, but how instructive is that though? Like even women who would say that I don't even believe in gender differences or whatever, they still find it attractive. They still intuitively know that there's something really right about this. So there is a point where it's like we are given strength for a reason, and we do occasionally may have to use it, but it's in the context of being the keeper of this garden where you're protecting these vulnerable blooms and species within this garden. So I think Zelensky's a really good example of that.
I'm pushing against an open door here, but I'm going to talk about Tom Bombadil briefly. I just listened to a book by C.R. Wiley on Tom Bombadil and what on earth that's all about. Because that's the character who's cut out of the movies because he doesn't actually make any dramatic difference to the plot. What on earth does this guy represent? And C.R. Wiley makes a very, very good case that he is the master. I think Goldberry calls him a master. So he is the master of nature, but he doesn't need to possess it and own it like Sauron does. and he's not affected by the ring. And he, in a way, Tolkien's showing a picture of this is what dominion kind of looks like, as opposed to domination and repression that you get from Sauron. I thought, oh, that's really interesting. So Tom Bombadil is this kind of slightly annoying, a little bit sing-song kind of guy, but actually he's really tough. No one can defeat him. He's got moves, and one of his things is he's a master, but he's not a dominator.
Well, I am seething right now with anger that you didn't tell me this before I finished the book, because that could have been like 6 chapters. Like that's awesome. That really is awesome. I have never thought about that. I have wondered the same thing, and I knew that there was discussion about that. But that makes total sense. He's enjoying this garden that he's in, and he's not trying to dominate everything. Like that's, and he's a safe place.
Yeah.
I mean, his place is literally safe. Like, so, wow, that's interesting.
Hey, we got to Tom Bombadil, so it's already. Good night, everyone. We're done.
Just tuned in. I just feel I need to say we've been talking about Lord of the Rings in case you weren't working out what was going on there.
Okay.
Which
that's true. That's a good point.
Anyway, so it's interesting you say that women instinctively respond to that when they see that in a man, even if they are not necessarily standing up for traditional masculine values on the face of it. Deep down, something.
I know they do.
Yeah. And for men as well, right? I mean,
100%. Yeah, I think so. No, I think so. Men are, since we are confused sometimes, we think, okay, that guy's jacked and he's got a bandolier of bullets and he can work it. We like, oh, cool. There's something, but we're missing something that we do respect more, which is a purpose. Like, what's the point of that? So I saw this poster, and I mentioned this like right off the bat in the book. When I was a freshman in college, like we had this men's house. It was like Christian guys at the University of Illinois, and there was an analogous women's house across the street. Still is. But they gave us a tour, so we go through all the girls' rooms there. In every single girls' room, it was the same poster. I was like, what the heck? And I remember joking about it, like, holy smokes, did they hand this out to everybody? Well, it turns out it's the best-selling poster of all time, still to this day. And I don't know if you guys have seen it. You probably have. I'm sure you have, whether you recognize it or not.
I've got it on my wall.
It's called L'Enfant. So it's this guy with no shirt on. I thought you were going to tell me that you're the guy that posed for it, so I didn't know. But
he's the baby.
Yeah. So that's the thing, though. It's a guy with no shirt on holding a baby, and I know the guy is good looking or whatever, but he's not that jacked. And there's a million male models in the world. Like, it could have been anybody, but the point was the girls were like, it's not the guy though. He's cute. It's the way the baby is looking at him. Like, that's interesting. This is the best-selling poster of all time. So more than 5 million posters. Women love the way the baby is looking at this guy, and they find that deeply, deeply attractive. And I remember taking note at the time as a guy who had no girlfriends and no hope, really, like, there's something deeply resonant for females, cross-culturally, I'm guessing, sure enough, it's true, that think that is what a man is for at the deepest level, and they're drawn to it. And I trust their judgment, to be honest with you.
We should probably be clear, though, that this book is not a pickup guide, because at the moment it sounds like if you want to attract women, then you need to be like this. But it is really significant that this is attractive to women, and most men, other men, feel threatened by it, and they sort of kind of step away or.
So what? That's what I was going to say.
It is.
Sorry,
it is, and it's not. It's not a pickup. It's not a pickup guide at all. And I'd be the last person, honestly. I joke about it. I have no idea how to flirt to this day. It's a joke with me and my wife. Like, it's an overt. I'm going to now attempt to flirt, and then I, wink or something. I'm the least guy, but it's so instructive. I did another thing, you guys, where I would speak. I've done this several times with like high school assemblies or whatever, or college people or adults. But I would show pictures of guys from the news. It might be they're pulling a child out of a car that's on fire, or there's a Japanese soldier carrying a older woman out of a village who's in trouble, or people rescuing people from a helicopter, guys pulling kids out of the water. Okay, they're all normal looking dudes, and they're all like different ethnicities and whatnot from different parts of the world. Just normal. Some of them are a little portly, some of them tall, some short, some just normal guys. And I would show these clips, just go, oh, that's interesting. And then I say, hey, ladies, by the way, are those guys attractive? And there is a visceral, immediate, univocal response of, yes. And I'm like, guys, take note of something, because, and I'll go back, I'll rewind through these photos. Like, look at these guys. None of them are Hollywood. They look like normal guys. And did you hear the response? There's something they intuit about what we're made for that tells you about your purpose in life. I believe that that's true. So even though this is not a pickup thing, but there is something that we should gain from that. It's like your own wife telling you, I find it really attractive when you stand up for us. Like, you should take note of that and go, well, maybe she deeply understands what my purpose is here. That really helps me with my purpose.
I was always told in the cultural hermeneutics class back at Trinity, which was something that Professor Kevin Van Hooser did, he always said, if you want to understand a cultural trend, follow the money. And it made me think of that when you talked about that poster being the biggest selling poster. So on the one hand, women are said to be saying one thing, but then follow the money. Okay, they're buying posters like this, or they are turning out in their millions to go see 50 Shades of Grey, which is also very, very revealing about what perhaps is lacking in some men. Not saying that that is the good way to go, but it's just very revealing. Mm-hmm. The other thing is with men, I think the same thing applies. I think there's a similar thing going on there. There are men who are deeply, deeply passive, and yet they are absolutely obsessed with games like Call of Duty or World of Warcraft, games which involve, cultivating teams and going after goals and protecting the innocent and all of that kind of stuff, which their hearts just go out to. And you make this point in the book. Again, it seems to me, it's frustrating, isn't it, that in a way we've got a generation of guys whose hearts are built for that, and they know it and they love it, and it's all being basically squandered on two-dimensional pixels instead of actual real life.
Right. Well, what hurts for me is I'm that guy. Like, that's my bent. I really like video games. And I can throw myself into them. I can play 16 straight hours and then think, oh my gosh, did the sun go down and then back up? And then I didn't even go to the bathroom. Like, I get it. And the problem is, it's easier to level up. It's easier to get things done more quickly. You get a dopamine hit. You feel like you're doing something, even though you're not. You get the hit like you've really accomplished something. And I understand that appeal. It's hard for real life to compete with that. But I'm trying to speak to the larger thing. I'm telling guys, like, you don't want to turn 75 or 80 and look back and thought, I just spent my life sitting in a chair or having virtual experiences. I don't think you want that. The other thing I'm trying to tell guys too, it's very easy for us to say, well, what if I do that? Am I really hurting anybody? Like, what if I just shut myself in? I have my online pornography. I have my online relationships. I have my online games. And I don't really venture outside. As long as I'm not hurting anybody else. I'm like, you are hurting everybody else because we needed you. Like, there is a purpose. You have a purpose. We needed your set of skills. We needed you to become maximally you with your personality and the things that God has given you. We needed you to grow up. We needed you to become someone that was life-giving to other people, and you could have, but you didn't show up. Like, we should at least realize that that's something to be feared. Like, that's scary to think you could wake up at 70 or 80 and go, oh my gosh, I never showed up. And we're on the precipice for a lot of guys that is a very real live issue for an awful lot of people. I'm not dissing video games. I'm just saying, honestly, they're so fun. And relationships are so much more difficult, and we guys tend to go places where we feel competent.
Yeah.
So it's hard for real life to
video
compete with
games
that.
are awesome. And
I really enjoyed your message for Jake. I really enjoyed your message for Jake that you using as an example, like, a basement computer games player. And actually, it was such a nice contrast to, 20 years ago, it was Mark Driscoll yelling at guys like that. You're a joke. What's the matter with you? Don't you want a nice wife? Don't you want to do this? And it's kind of the yelling approach, which, works on some. They find that kind of invigorating. But actually, I thought your appeal, which was like, man, we need you out here. God's given you some gifts and abilities, and we kind of need you. It's much more inspiring. And I don't think a lot of guys maybe feel that, because there is a big kick against how a lot of men have behaved historically over decades and centuries. It's like, just stay in the basement,
totally,
and we don't want to ever hear from you again. It's actually, no, it's not. We need you guys.
Well, and gentleness gets a bad rap, and I try to redeem that in the book too. Like, this is a part of the gardening picture, the cultivating picture, is gentleness. I mean, Jesus is described in I think it's Isaiah, like he won't even break a bruised reed. He won't put out a smoldering wick. He describes himself as gentle in heart. Like, so there's absolutely, that is often missing from that flexing manhood thing that can happen in Christianity. Again, I think a lot of it's a pushback to where we have failed, but we want the whole picture. I do think this gentle keeper of the garden idea is fruitful. I don't mean there's no pun intended, but I think it is a fruitful word picture, and I because it's biblical, I really do believe in it.
Dig down a little bit on that, because I think a lot of people, when they hear you talk about gentleness, will be equating that with a kind of passivity, a kind of a sort of a quietness, maybe a timidity. What is distinctive, do you think, about the sort of gentleness that we see in Jesus and we see in the Bible that is distinct from what a lot of people go, oh yeah, well, I'm like that? Because I wouldn't say boo to a goose. I'm gentle. Are you?
Yeah. Well, he clearly Jesus's gentleness includes telling people what's what, like people who are in positions of influence and have, he's very honest. But I think the gentleness is these people who feel vulnerable around him feel like they can approach him. I mean, that's kind of amazing, including women, like in that culture, to understand, and you guys do, this, but like in a traditional culture like that, for him to welcome women as he did and to make the woman at the well the first Christian missionary, basically, like that's radical stuff. But I love that people who are on the margins could instantly be like the woman who comes, she's bleeding and embarrassed, and he heals her because she touches his garment, but then I think he calls her his sister in front of everybody. Like, that is like, he's not going to bruise her. He's not going to break her. She's already bleeding and embarrassed. Like, he exalts her. That is a gentleness that I think there's an aggressiveness to that sort of gentleness. Like, that you are so secure, that you're not needy, that you're able to do that to people who have no currency in the culture whatsoever. They feel at home with you.
Gentleness that'll get you into trouble, I suppose. That's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't think we typically think of gentleness.
It really does, and I think yeah. And I think a lot of the flexing preacher, masculine, I ride a motorcycle across the stage thing, which was like a phenomenon several years ago, which I documented. For some reason, there's a bunch of preachers that felt a need to ride a motorcycle on the stage to demonstrate that they can ride a motorcycle. But I think a lot of that flexing thing misses out on the gentleness, the accessibility that little kids would want to play with you, and that women who you don't want anything from would feel at home with you and lifted up and protected. Like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. We could maybe talk for a long time and basically tell people what's in the book, but we actually want people to buy it. So there are sort of 6 things that you go through in the book, and we won't go through them all, about 6 decisions that you can make. Which of those 6 did you kind of find maybe hardest to enunciate or write about? Or even just include, just think, nah, I don't think this is, but you thought, no, I really have to include this.
That's a great question. I would say, like, maybe it's the 6th one. I talk about taking responsibility for your own spiritual life. And that may sound boring, but I think there's actually some really good news in here. And I'm telling guys, and I've written about this before in Blessed Are the Misfits, like, for those of us who don't have the emotional reaction to church culture, there's a lot of guys who like, I don't relate to God like my wife does at all. I don't get this. I'm on the periphery, if at all. I don't get it. Well, I wanted to reassure them that the Christian life, like, what God is looking for is not emotion. I mean, emotion is great, and that can be a part of things. That's wonderful. Like, he gave us emotions for a reason. It's wonderful. But what I see in Scripture is God's looking for this thing called loyalty. Like, this deep loyalty where I keep showing up whether I have emotions or not. And even as a sinner who gets caught up in things, I'm going to keep showing up every day. I keep talking to him. What I see in Scripture is a lot of people that he honors just because they're just so loyal. They just keep coming back. Job said a lot of stupid stuff, and then God blasts him for the stupid stuff he says, and then rewards him for being loyal. He rewards him in the end. Like, so a lot of us guys, I think, and women too, but particularly for guys, it's resonant to go, you know what? I get loyalty. I understand that. Through thick and thin. I understand it. It reminds me of a story told by J.R.R. Tolkien called Lord of the Rings. And I was just kidding. But it's true. Like, guys do understand friendship till the end, loyalty to the end, partnership to the end. We get it. And I think that's a better picture of what the Christian life is like than just about anything else. And it's also very scriptural. It's Hesed, and in the Hebrew, God's loyalty to us, but it's also our loyalty to him. Steadfast, loving, believing loyalty, regardless of what's going on. So that was the big thing with taking control of your own spiritual life. Like, turn your attention to God. Your attention is everything. It determines who you're becoming. What you put your attention on now determines the man that you're becoming. So turn your attention to him. That's so important, and it's going to be life-giving for you, and then it ripples out to everyone around you. I'm just convinced
of
crucial,
it. Isn't it?
It's so easy for Christians to feel... Sorry, Barry, you go for it.
I was just going to say, that's so crucial, isn't it? Because without that, there is a danger that you end up in a book that is rightly heavy on imperatives. I mean, Scripture's heavy on imperatives as well. It could be backbreaking, it could be heartbreaking. But if we know that actually, this is all fulfilled in Christ. He's the one who models it. He's also the one who is there ready to embrace us when we fail at these standards we set for ourselves. That then gives you the incentive to keep aiming high in this way. Yeah,
and it's such a beautiful picture. Like, think long term. Like, to be a guy who's like an oak tree that people, your generations following you can gather around, and you were there. Versus isolating yourself, which I could easily do. Isolate myself and then be lonely in the end. Like, there's something really beautiful about this, and it's not a bunch of guilt. It's quite the opposite. I hope it's just a great picture of what we can be like.
It feels really countercultural to me because, and that's no small thing. If a virtue is under great attack, we probably want to pay close attention to that. Christians in particular are constantly told to disavow this, to cancel that person. This great Christian person of the past did something that we now find unthinkable, unspeakable. Therefore, burn the lot. And this denomination did this, therefore disavow. And it ends up with me and my Bible, and I'm not even sure about me, or the Bible. So it doesn't really work, does it? I mean, this loyalty thing, I think, is really important, and we're just not really prepared to do it. It's just so easy to throw someone under the bus, and we just need to stop that.
Yes, and it's so true. And we cancel ourselves too, I think, to some extent, with our relationship with God. We cut ourselves off, and it's a lot of times it's out of that shame. And I'm trying to say, like, as a sinner, I don't want to do that, because you think, like, you just implicitly have this, whether you want to acknowledge the guilt or not, it's there, and you can either bring yourself back to God or not. And I think that's why I keep trying to stress this loyalty thing. Like, I am a sinner. I fail to love people like I should. I fail to love God as I should, but He wants me to keep coming back. So I keep having a prayer time in the morning when I'm walking the dog. I keep, regardless of what I'm caught up in, I'm like, no, I'm coming back. I'm going to keep doing this. God, you're my best friend. You're all I've got. I'm going to keep talking. And that's been really helpful to me, instead of just disappearing in my relationship with God for months, or again, just canceling my relationship with Him. And that's awful.
Mm. And in terms of reactions so far, you've got some lovely positive press quotes and things in the top there. But how have people responded to various bits? Have any responses kind of surprised you, or something just appears to have a resonance you hadn't expected?
I'm really genuinely excited at how people have responded to this, including, like, on my launch team. You have some people read the book early and you hope they like it. I had, like, one woman who's commenting, who's like, I am a feminist, period, unapologetically. I didn't know what to expect. I love this book. I thought that was really interesting, because this is not a placating thing. It's not a political thing. I'm not doing an academic treatise. Like I said, it's not about gender theory. It's not like, I'm literally just saying, wouldn't it be life-giving if this keeper of the garden thing, if men inhabited this space? And her response is kind of like, well, women have reacted to men's failure to do this for a long time. And I think that's right. So I was really gratified to read that, because it's not like I'm trying to please everybody. But that was my thinking too. I was just thinking, I think somebody who's intellectually honest might come at it from that angle. I hope they do, where they're actually looking at it going, I didn't expect, but yeah, I think this is what men are for. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of cool. I was grateful for that. I don't know how much of that I'll get. I hope I get a lot, but we'll see.
Yeah. What advice do you give to young men who, or maybe not even young men, who are new fathers and are struggling to reorient with kids? I know that you have a son or daughter that you love dearly and very rightly proud of.
Yeah.
What do you, because it can seem really overwhelming. I mean, marriage is a big hit for a start. You go, oh, I can't live like I used to live as a single guy. Marriage is done. And then you have kids and it's like everything's ramped up to 11. It can seem like you're sort of going out of water a little bit. What should those guys keep their focus on?
Well, I made some mistakes and I did some things right. And I'll tell you this, it took me a while to get reconciled to being married. After I was still kind of being a goof. And a friend of mine once said, because he got married before I did, and I'm like, how's it going? Wink, wink, nod, nod. How's marriage like? And I expected some sort of I don't know what, joke. He said, Brant, I'm telling you, you do not realize how selfish you are until you get married. Like, okay, well, I learned that. He was right. And then I learned it again when we had kids. Like, so I would just say, throw yourself into it. This is where you are. Reconcile yourself to this is where you are. Do it all the way. One thing I did, which was really good, which I do talk about in the book, like, of all the mistakes I made, one thing I nailed was I had a stressful job and I quit it, took a way less stressful job with less prestige, and made almost no money. But I had afternoons free with my kids as they grew up. So every afternoon we're at the beach, we're at the pool, we're goofing off with Dad. And we barely made ends meet financially. And that was a brilliant way to do it. Brilliant. And what's interesting too, the Lord has provided after the kids have left the house. Well, then I'm making more money. Like, I'm making up for some lost ground where we had no retirement, no nothing. And I'm not guaranteeing that's what will happen to everybody, but that is what happened to us. I would not do that. Was a perfect decision. I would not do that again and do it any differently. I know my kids, they know me, and I highly encourage guys, if they're like, well, if I did that, we'd have to live in a trailer. I'm like, well, then live in a trailer. Well, we couldn't take vacations. Well, then turn the sprinkler on at the trailer and let your trailer kids run through the sprinkler and laugh with them and enjoy the day, because you're not getting this time back. You do not get to replay this. So that's my overarching, if I was going to say something, just remember that and enjoy the heck out of every stage of this. As you know, you guys, like, it starts off, if you're reconciled to it, it starts off really sweet and interesting, and it's hard, and it gets even better and better as they get older. It's just even funnier, and now I got friends. And now I have funny friends that I get to interact with.
Yeah. And I think men know this intellectually, and women too, about, you know, and often say to women who are thinking about hurrying back to work, I just don't think you'll regret spending more time with your kids. It just seems so unlikely that aged 80, you'll just think, you know what I really regret? I really regret not working harder and longer and not being with my kids. Said no one ever, you know. And I think we intellectually know that. But I think particularly for guys who feel a need to provide, I think we might easily use that as cover for, I have to spend more time in my office or away so that my kids can have stuff. And it's like, your kids don't want stuff, they want you. And I think some men genuinely have a hard time believing that. For whatever reason.
It is hard. It is hard. But, man, the payoff of knowing your kids and having your kids thoroughly know you will go on and on and on. I mean, part of it is you can live in antithesis, too. Like, if you didn't grow up with a good dad situation, you can say, I don't know how this is supposed to work. Well, I know in my experience and in other guys' experience that you can flip that on its head. My thing was, I don't want my kids to feel like maybe I did, where I would hope my dad wasn't home, you know, and I feel a kick to the stomach, like it's just gonna, oh no, what's gonna happen now? And sure enough, we made it. Like, we raised them, and when I came to the door, it was, Dad, you know, and they're running and excited that I'm home. Like, well, that's pretty cool, all things considered.
Except you're 23 now, so you really have to stop doing that. Maybe.
Yeah, at some point. Yeah. Now I run at them now.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah. The other hot tip I give to new dads is hand cream. You will never wash your hands more than the first 6 months of your first baby. Your hands will be red raw. Get hand cream. You are welcome, listeners. You are welcome.
That's true. That's good. Take a Sharpie and please put that in my book. Like, they have a couple notes pages or something. Just because I forgot to put that in it. Write Tom Bombadil and hand cream in there, if you would.
We got a question from Tim, one of our patrons. And by the way, if you would like to become a patron and get extended episodes and hear more of Brant talking and other people that we have on, or even more of James and I talking, if that's, you know, the way you're wired, become a patron and you get advanced episodes, extended episodes, exclusive episodes that have never been aired. You get exclusive access to our Discord server, which is a whole bunch of fun, and all that stuff. Just go to our website, cooperandcary.com, and click on the link that says Patreon, or follow the link in the show notes. But one of our patrons, Tim, has asked this question: how should we get the men together for something specific to them without constantly removing them from their work and family responsibilities? E.g., wives with young children do struggle if the men are out once a week. Have you found it? Because I know you have a cohort of guys that I know you're maybe at a different stage of life, maybe don't have young kids, but is there any wisdom you could pour into that question?
You know, I don't have a good answer, except I have been trying stuff. So in my neighborhood, we've done this a couple times now, where I have discipleship meetings. It's neighborhood guys, all different levels of, like, been a believer for a long time, could lead if they wanted or not, or brand new to it, no idea. And one thing that was really successful, I only made it for 1 month long. It was only Monday night from 7 to 8. It was 1 hour. And I'm like, we're ending at 8. I promise you that. It's not going longer. Well, the fact that it was only for a month and it was only for an hour had a lot of appeal, including for the wives with the little kids, because everybody there was in that situation. So, and the content of it is stuff that when they go back, I think their wives are really happy that they just talked about that for an hour. So I release guys. It's 8 o'clock. I'm like, we're done. Goodbye. If they want to stick around, they usually do, but that's up to them. You know, some guys are like, I got to get back. Most stick around for another couple hours to laugh and talk and stuff. But just having the limited sign up, and then we did it again in January. Like, okay, one more month, 7 to 8, and you don't feel like you're committing for the rest of your life to this thing, and then you're going to have this awkward exit where you have to go, I really don't want to go anymore. Like, no, you're done. We're done. We may do it again, but it's worked out great. So I do recommend that 1 hour max thing because of the stress that women have with being left behind with the kids, and now guys have one more open, unending thing that could go on forever. I think it's appealing to have these limits. I don't know. That's just an idea.
Yeah. It was really good. The other thing that you suggested, and you suggested this on our podcast a while ago or something, is we got some guys together on a Sunday night, I think, when our church wasn't meeting, and we just took it in turns individually just to tell your story. And, you know, we did that, huh? And it was great. There was no great Bible study, anything like that. It was just like, here's what I did. And then people weren't asking challenging questions, but they were just asking, oh, so hang on, between this period and this period, what was happening there, and that kind of stuff. And just, it was just really helpful. I don't quite know what we do with it or where we go, but it just felt like we just got somewhere, and that we just deepened some relationships because we now kind of know some stuff about each other.
Yes. Right. So I haven't met with that group for a while. After COVID really killed that. Like where we could meet regularly, because they have little kids or people with comorbidities and whatnot. We're just like, okay, made it tough. However, after doing that, you're like bonded to these guys. I have felt that still to this day. So we had a birthday party like 3 days ago out at somebody's house. It's still the same group of guys and their families. Like we're still like we don't even talk about. We know we're good friends, and it's all just from being really vulnerable and listening to each other's stories. That really has been a lasting thing. That's fascinating that you did that.
That's great idea.
Great suggestion. I would never have thought of that. I don't know. Yeah.
Take this book, because you've got discussion questions at the end, right? Written by your brother, I think I'm right in saying. Is that right?
Yeah, he's so nice, my brother. He is such a good guy. He is a West Ham fan, which he's the only one I know. So he's a unique guy who helps me a lot, and it's nice to have somebody else write those, because they're thinking about it from a different perspective. So my brother has always been a blessing. He's 2 years older, always looked out for me, always helped me like know how to dress, how to function, everything. So he just I can't dedicate every book to him, but I think I did the last one.
In all seriousness, I do think it would be a terrific thing for guys, if they are getting together for that hour a week. This would be a great thing to do, to just look, as the chapters are super short. So there's tons of stuff in there to unpack. So it'd be a great idea to do that. Any other questions?
It's also, can I say, it's no more questions from me other than guys get it, ladies get it and give it to a guy.
Yeah.
It's properly funny. It made me laugh out loud and nudge my wife and read out bits. So, I mean, jokes really help. And there's some pretty weapons grade jokes in there. So but it didn't make it trivial or goofy. It just felt right. So I recommend that. Rush out and buy.
That's right.
Yeah. Rush out and buy The Men We Need, pre-order it, and then read it, maybe with some other guys. I think that's what we're going to do at my church. I'm going to say, guys, we need to read this, and then we'll do. But I like the idea of like, we're going to meet for a month every this day, and then we'll just stop. And anyone who wants to come back after that in a few months can do that, or that would be cool.
Yeah, give it a shot. I'll be interested to hear how that goes. I also recommend, this is just a humble, suggestion. That is, get enough books and then a helicopter, and then just do an airdrop over a large area. Just with thousands. That's just. It's up to you if you don't want to do that.
But if one book gets into the right hands, then that's worth everything, isn't it?
Then it's worth it, isn't it?
Yeah. To not do that would actually be morally wrong. Yeah.
I'd agree.
Right, to know the right thing and not do it is wrong.
Yeah,
so.
Man up, get on with it.
Well,
I hope you can stick around over on the Patreon, because I'm going to ask you a question about Dallas Willard, which is basically, who is Dallas Willard?
Oh, good.
And why do you keep quoting him? But we're going to wrap up this podcast now.
Good.
So thanks very much, Brant.
Thank you so much, Brant. It's a joy to speak to you as always.
Thank you.
Also, we're saying that James has just done the inaugural Cooper and Cary book club as one of the perks for Patreons. So maybe, who knows, we'll get to Brant's book
cool.
and go through that as a book club thing. Not sure what the next one's going to be, whether it's going to be Fahrenheit 451 or something else. But
that's what they're all wanting, Barry. It's going to be Fahrenheit 451.
It's a fun thing to do if you do become a patron. If you want to get in touch with us, send us your angry emails, please, to cooperandcary@gmail.com. You can get us on all the usual places, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all those places you should probably be spending a lot less time on. I think I've covered everything, have I, James?
That's pretty good to me.
All right, good.
I tell people to send their angry items to, or angry emails to deleteditems@gmail.com. That's what I tell them. So,
I don't care @gmail.com. Yeah. All right, lots of love, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Hopefully,
speak to you soon.
Speak to you again in a couple of weeks. Bye.
Cheerio. So we're still on recording with, and our Patreons will be listening to this or watching this. You quote Dallas Willard a lot, and I know nothing about him, I presume. So tell me more about Dallas Willard, and which book should I start with?
I'm reading Hearing God right now, and I'm really appreciating it. But you might start with The Divine Conspiracy. That's probably his biggest selling book. He is a lot of what I want to be. And besides, I mean, he's deceased. Eventually, I'm going to be that. He has a gentleness to him. Everybody, when they talk about him, says like when they interacted with him, that they felt like he was unaware of anybody else in that moment, in that person. He was a titanic intellect. He was a philosophy professor at USC, at the University of Southern California, for decades. He started as a pastor and wound up in that position. And he brought all that brilliance to bear. He's one of the smartest people I've ever read, but he is very gentle in his way about wanting to communicate the kingdom of God to people who aren't intellectual giants. Every sentence he uses is balanced and deliberate, and he uses like a good dictionary definition writing approach to how to speak. Like, he doesn't waste any words. He also doesn't tell many stories, and he's not particularly funny. He could be funny when he was off the cuff, but he didn't try to be funny, which honestly, James, Barry, opens up a huge field for us, because this guy's stuff is so good. And he openly said, go ahead and rip me off.
Wow. Right.
That's good.
Because it wasn't about him. He's like, just take the ideas. I still do attribute, as you've noticed all the time. I just feel sheepish about parroting something he said and not attributing. But he has influenced so many people down the line, and I highly recommend reading him. He also just has a take on the kingdom that is fresh and different. I don't know how you'll approach this. I know you guys are both Calvinists, I would say.
Pretty
right?
much.
That's right. Yeah. So I have a lot of sympathies for a lot of that, but I'm not all the way on board. Dallas wasn't all the way on board either. He was very much about how God wants to change us. And so I think there might be some pushback from some. I know he has extreme respect from a lot of Calvinists too, don't get me wrong, but his emphasis was very much on becoming disciples, learning and changing, and how God does that. And I'm a big fan of that.
Well, I mean,
I need to read that
so that's Dallas Willard.
I mean, there's no one great writer pretty much that you can just go, well, yeah, every single thing they write is great. You can't even do that with Augustine.
Totally.
So it's like, so why would Dallas Willard be the one that you can just sort of just say, yeah?
No, he would be he would be shocked if somebody did that with him. That's just not his approach at all. But you know what, though? Like, again, it's third hand. Hearing people talk about him third hand. I'm not saying he's a hero. I'm not saying I'm a disciple of Dallas. He would keep pointing towards Christ. But I do, as I get older, I want to be gentle like him and not needy like him. He comes across as not needy at all. And on his deathbed, his family said his last words he kept repeating before he died was, "Thank you." And they're saying he was talking to God. They didn't think he was talking to them in the room. And he even himself said that what God is doing is he's changing us so that we can become the sort of people that he can trust to rule and reign. Like he's wanting us to become these different sorts of people over the trajectory of our lives. And I do think that's true. So if I'm on my deathbed saying thank you, I feel like that's a pretty good trajectory.
Pretty good.
There was talking about things for your second edition. There was one thought I had when you were writing about the devil, where you were talking about what the devil does, and you were talking about separation. And I only know this because I did a Simply Put thing on Satan. But if you look in the Hebrew, the New Testament equivalent is diabolos, which is used interchangeably with Satan. Diabolos actually means separate.
Right. Divide.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. Right. It's like this separate, and it's also slanderer. So it's like he separates people from each other and people from God by slandering them and him. It's really, really interesting little nugget, you know. So there you go. Sorry, that's probably
thanks
really
for calling that back to my attention.
That, isn't it? But anyway.
It totally is. I should have known that. And I remember even talking about that on the air one time, but that's what I meant, and I would like to make a big deal out of that because I think that's so true. It's always isolating, ultimately.
That's it.
Yeah, it's always leaving me with me, talking about my sin.
Yeah.
And then conversely, growing up means more connection with people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
certainly better. That's a much better contribution to the book than my contribution, which was, "Hey, Brant, do you want to see a wasp trying to make out with an orchid?" That was my contribution to his book.
I just got to tell you, James, I'm so tired of you sending me videos of wasps making out with orchids. If I could get one more.
It's disgusting.
Oh, my goodness. It's disgusting, and you never stop. The relentlessness
it's demeaning to
of
the
it.
wasps.
No,
Really
that was brilliant. So, you know what? James sent me. Did you see this, Barry? Did you see that video? He sent. I don't know. So
he's got a web filter that just takes that stuff away.
It's going to report it to my parser if I do that.
I get it. You're like a wasp sexual thing.
We should probably put this link somewhere.
I write in the book.
Yeah, we'll put the link in the show notes. But explain to our Patreons what the heck we're talking about.
So search for sneaky orchid.
So if you haven't shut this off out of frustration. Okay, so I write in the book about supernormal stimuli, and how it leaves real life behind, especially for guys, as we know. So these virtual women, these pixels, will actually destroy your sex life potentially with a real woman, and we are seeing this writ large over the culture. I mean, there's all sorts of studies about that, like our sex lives are taking a back seat to fake stuff. So I just talk about how that works. And there's even studies that have been done on supernormal stimuli. So these are exaggerated versions of real things that actually take the place of the real. One guy did a series of studies about it. He took a butterfly model and used butterfly colors of a female and then made it really exaggerated and then even took the wings off. So it was just a tube at this point with exaggerated colors. And the male butterflies went so wild because of the exaggerated colors. Meanwhile, right near them, available are female butterflies flapping their wings trying to get attention, and they cannot get the attention of the males, the real ones. And so I use several examples, but but James noted this and had seen on the, what is it called?
The Green Planet on BBC Earth. So
Green
it was,
Planet.
there was a
Green Planet.
new series,
Yeah. So that it happens in nature. There's an orchid that makes itself look like a female wasp in the color and shape in order to get pollinated to attract male wasps. And you can see the male wasp going right past the female who's right there at the same level, like a few feet off the ground, watching this male try to mate with a non-living, like it's just with a plant. And they're both just kind of waving in the wind, and she's right there watching, and he is getting all, excited. There's other males coming over. They're getting excited about this fake thing, and they get all pollinated themselves, pollen on them, and like fall to the ground. And she is right there, being ignored. I was like, that is an amazing trick that this orchid is using to draw maybe wasps to their death, but by exaggerating what could have been life-giving is instead life-taking because of this exaggerated fake. And I'm like, if there's not a better picture of what we're up against as a culture. And that's the other thing, too. I tell guys, like, it's not supposed to be this hard. It has not been this difficult for guys generations past, ever. Like, the stuff that is available in the isolation, like, we never had this before. This is, I feel for us. I feel for all of us. It's not supposed to be this difficult. You told a story
about going off and I think it's building a house somewhere in the developing world, and you took a bunch of guys who were kind of like 18, 19-year-olds, and at the end of the week you said, just out of interest, anybody struggled with lust this week? It's like, no, it didn't even cross our minds, because they're just no internet, no screens, and a mind fully engaged,
and they're
with
busy.
The task in hand.
Yes, and so much interaction. So we're building this house without power tools. It's basically a big shed. We're doing what we can, and it's mainly a chance to get away and do stuff. I try to be of service, but basically I'm trying to disciple these guys and ladies too, the co-ed group. But I talked to these guys that I have rapport with and said, hey, just curious, because this was their number one thing all the time was lust. Constantly thinking about it. Obviously it's the biggest, most important thing in the world. At the end of the week, I shocked them with that question because they were like, wait, I really haven't thought about it much. We work all day. We're laughing the entire time and talking. Then we have dinner together, and then we talk and goof off, and then we're dead dog tired. And then we wake up, and then we're laughing again, and we're getting ready. Like, we don't have time. Like, that is a typical human experience where you've got people all around you. There's no privacy. Not really. People are in and out of each other's tents or homes. We were in tents. You're working with people at something. You're not isolated all the time, and you got to provide something for safety or for the village or something. Like, that's the usual human existence. It's a much easier existence when it comes to this than what we have, obviously.
Yeah.
Do we ask what books you're currently reading, or anything that's particularly? It doesn't have to be on this subject at all, but anything you're particularly into right now.
You'll remember the guy's name. I just finished. And I'm going to butcher it. It's terrible.
Ishiguro.
It's a...
Yeah, that guy is amazing.
Yeah. Moved to England when he was like 5 or whatever, from Japan or something like that. I just read the one, I can't remember what it's called, but it's an artificial intelligence friend. They would buy, like, it's in the future, but they would buy teenagers an AI friend, like a robot, to be their pal.
Never Let Me Go.
Just to have interaction.
Never Let Me Go. Yeah.
Something like that. I didn't even realize it was the guy that wrote I just thought it was a Japanese, like, sci-fi guy. I didn't realize he wrote Remains of the Day. Like, I've read that
amazing.
Years ago.
It couldn't be more different. It's just amazing.
Yeah, but there is a wistful ache in his writing that I really like. So I just finished that. And I'm reading this Dallas Willard book about hearing God, and I'm really benefiting from that.
Good call.
Because he says we should hear God, and I've always been like, I've never heard God. So what's wrong with me? And here I've got Dallas Willard saying you should be hearing God. And then the way he talks about it is you start to recognize his voice. It doesn't have to be an audible voice, but you just start to recognize his voice in circumstances and things through what people say to you. You start to become more aware. I'm like, oh, okay, all right. Yeah, that's life-giving to me to read that, like how to make space for that. So
I've definitely experienced that more. I don't hear audible voices. I've never heard audible voices from God. But in the last few years particularly, there have just been moments where I've just thought, sort of humanly speaking, you would say, wow, the universe is really trying to tell me something. You read something, there's a random video on YouTube, you switch on the TV, and then out of the blue, somebody else says to you, and it's just like smack, smack, smack. So it feels like God's kind of punching messages onto my face with his fist, because I just can't, for some reason, can't seem to hear. That's one way, I guess.
Yeah, it's usually stuff like, as I'm understanding it, I noticed it's things that wouldn't have naturally, maybe it's not something I wanted, or maybe it's something that's very generous to me that I wouldn't have guessed, like someone reminding me that God loves me in some way that I needed to hear. Like, so there's and it could be books and scripture and like all sorts of things, but or ideas popping into my head that seem a little out of my character but are true. So acknowledging those things is really helpful to me, so I'm not down all the time thinking I'm missing out on something. I was scared to read the book because I was like, oh no, I don't hear God. That helped.
Cool. Well, it's 6 p.m. UK time, so we should probably wrap this up. I guess, but thanks so much for giving us your time and for dashing from one place to another. That's great.
Thanks, Brant. Thank you very much.
Yes, thanks for your patience with me. Thank you, guys. God bless you.
Thank you.
Tuba and T have words.